My name is Alicia Grubb, and this is a quick overview of my paper, Four Opportunities for SE Ethics Education. So it should be no surprise to anyone attending this workshop that software engineering has ethical issues and that we need to prepare our students for dealing with the challenges of these ethical issues in their work. A quick Google search leads to lists of many issues described by developers. In evaluation of the codes and curricula available for software engineering, the IEEE code says that we want to ensure that practitioners and their colleagues uphold the highest standard of professional activities and treat all persons fairly and with respect. The ACM code goes further, looking at human aspects of ethics as well as some more professional specific ethics. The combined IEEE and ACM Joint Task Force on Software Engineering Ethics goes further to look at software specific issues such as emergent properties from the system, as well as issues with data and privacy, as well as when the system evolves, what new ethical issues could happen. In a North American context, looking at curricular recommendations, both the CEAB and IREB recommend between 1 and 6 hours of ethics education for computer scientists or software engineers. This should include topics such as licensing, ethics, contracts, and the social and legal issues of concern. Both curricular recommendations agree that this is a cross-cutting criteria that should be complete throughout the curriculum. In my own study of ethics education, it leads me to the open question of what it means for our students to master ethics education. So we want students to be able to learn ethical skills such as recognizing and raising and responding to ethical concerns by proposing an ethical solution. So the question I have is, does mastery of ethical concepts imply ethical behavior? And if we assume mastery, how do engineers behave? So on tests, we can see mastery, but in reality, these may be on one end of the spectrum, rote performers, versus on the other end of the spectrum, what I'm calling perfunctory performers, individuals who know the correct answer, but may not necessarily do that in real life. And so I believe we're looking to develop our engineers to be somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. But changing behavior is an incredibly tall order, especially if we do this in the context of only a few hours of instructions. And so perhaps what we're asking educators to do is unreasonable. So what do we actually want? And what I think is that we want students to be able to see ethics in different contexts and know different ways of handling it. So we want them to understand terms. We want to train them to analyze problems as well as to observe those problems in their work and have the appropriate tools to make an informed decision about whatever they decide to do. So this leads me to the 4 challenges and opportunities that I discuss in the paper. The first of which is to create a robust collection of examples. In perusing the many software engineering textbooks, when discussing ethics, they are often presented in the form of a vignette, such as this one. A deadline is quickly approaching for a project that you are working on. You realize that you are not able to meet the deadline. If you only work normal hours, you are not allowed to take your computer home. So what do you do? And it's often presented with 3 to 4 options. This one has 3. Download the data to your personal hard drive and continue at home. B, unsure. Or C, stay at work longer in order to continue development. What this closed form question does not allow students to explore is the different options in the scenario, as well as other options that they could pursue. For example, depending on whether the individual under question is a new employee versus a senior developer, they might have a different perspective on whether they can push the deadline back. The deadline issue may not actually be their fault, and it could be an issue with poor sprint planning. So depending on who the person is, they may or may not be able to negotiate a new deadline or perhaps get this feature moved to the next deadline. But all of these are taken as fact and not having nuanced in this scenario. Also, in these scenarios, there's rarely issues with what happens if stakeholders don't collect requirements from users of the system. Also, the question that I look at with some of my students is, are software designers responsible for the designs for the lifetime of the system, or is that the responsibility of the maintainers? And who is responsible for unknown and known impacts of algorithms, whether they may be unethical, as well as if an application is found to be addictive, should it be removed? Should it be changed in some capacity to make it less addictive? And so these are the types of questions that my students are very interested in, and I don't have appropriate examples for them to explore. So this is an opportunity for us as a community to develop more cases with open-ended questions and scenarios with nuance. So here's an example of what I consider to be a robust, appropriate case study. And this one comes from Santa Clara University. So in 2015, a bug was found by Google's in-house security team in a Microsoft product. Google informed Microsoft and then gave them 90 days to fix the bug per their policy, which is very strict. But unfortunately, Microsoft could not fix the bug until just before the deadline, and they put it out on their next quote unquote patch Tuesday of the month, which happened to be the second Tuesday of the month. Unfortunately, due to Google's strict policy, they published the existence of the vulnerability prior to the release, and so users were at risk for 2 days before they could get the security update. And so the question, there's many issues within this scenario. And so we want students to be able to have these larger scenarios to look at possible issues. So I'm calling for us to create a collection of these robust examples like the one you see here. How I think we can do this is both students and researchers can create these examples. I could have my students doing it as a writing project. They could interview alumni and get firsthand accounts of ethical scenarios that the alumni have been involved in. Also, we could look at recent events in the news, such as notable whistleblowers, in order to create examples. So my first opportunity is for us to create large, robust case studies as the one you're currently looking at. My second opportunity depends on the first, and that is the idea of taking these case studies and implementing them into workshops. So the problem with the vignettes, as described above, is that they are narrowly defined and give the notion of a correct answer, which results in binary thinking. So students think there is only one right way to perform a task ethically. And they do not encourage brainstorming or divergent thinking. So instead, I believe that we have the opportunity to create mini workshops in order to look at ethical scenarios in a more nuanced way. So what I'm suggesting is that we engage learners in multiple modes of instruction and assessment. For example, you could teach fundamentals such as details about the code and the responsibilities through lectures, then use a mini workshop with the case studies we already generated in Opportunity 1 to engage students in groups so they can identify the core issues, as well as explore the problem, possible causes, and possible solutions, and look at multiple solutions from opposing viewpoints. This gives us the opportunity to include the ideas of multiple ethical frameworks. I would also consider adding such activities such as debates, role-playing, and using formal arguments to improve students' writing. This gives educators an opportunity to collaborate with other disciplines such as philosophy. For example, in our robust example that we had above, some questions that we could ask is, to what extent did the release unnecessarily put users at risk? How, if at all, should Google's firm 90-day policy be adjusted based on the situation? Is there a reason that that Microsoft had to wait until Patch Tuesday? What obligations do security researchers have? And would this situation change if the vulnerability was found by an ethical hacker? The first two opportunities I presented were more concrete, whereas the second two are more aspirational. The third opportunity I look at is whether we can use effective learning outcomes. In order to prioritize ethical issues, students need to value ethics. So I think there's an opportunity for the ACM code to be extended to include some of these effective learning outcomes, such as committing to treat your other colleagues fairly, as well as defending intended actions as ethical. However, it's very challenging to create effective learning outcomes, and it's more challenging to assess them. In order to continue to combat the challenges of rote performers, as a first step, I'm taking some ideas from the learning sciences, and I think that it would be best if we ask students to propose new questions to get them closer to an appropriate solution, rather than asking them to give an appropriate solution immediately. For example, with the Google Microsoft robust example, a student could propose the following 3 questions to get them closer to an answer. For example, what is Google's motivation for this policy? Did Microsoft make a good faith effort to get the fix implemented by the previous Patch Tuesday? And did Google have anything to gain from the temporary Microsoft vulnerability? And so by answering these questions, we can understand how students are thinking and get closer to helping them to value ethics. My final opportunity that I'm presenting today is to encourage professionalism. So students do not see software engineering as a profession, and they don't value the shared community of this profession. When we teach ethics separate from technical concepts, this partitions their learning, and they don't see them as being complementary. So as an opportunity for us as a community, I think we need to create a variety of ethics activities throughout the software engineering curriculum in order to help students connect ethical thinking with technical thinking, as well as embed them as part of project-based learning or capstone courses across the entire software lifecycle. So there's ethics within requirements elicitation, within design and testing, and as well within project management in terms of communication between developers and users. And so we can engage them in these activities where ethics is seen as part of a professional practice. Then, additionally, we can engage students through mentorship in terms of professionalism beyond the classroom, such as connecting them with these professional societies, as well as near peers that can act as mentors in order to help students engage with professional societies. Finally, professional societies themselves can play a stronger role in enforcing and really capturing the benefits of performing ethical software engineering. So in summary, in this paper, I present 4 opportunities for software engineering ethics. They are to create realistic case studies, to replace lectures with exploratory workshops to increase student engagement, as well as embedding ethics throughout the software engineering curriculum, as already recommended by the ACM curriculum. Third, to assess learners' progress towards ethical thinking on the affective domain, and give curricular recommendations to improve effective learning outcomes. And finally, to advocate for students to see software engineering as a profession, both as part of their educational program and beyond. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to discussing this further in the questions session.
Fairness is
Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia Grubb, and I'm going to be presenting my paper, 4 Opportunities for SE Ethics Education. I'm from Smith College, and so let's jump in. So if you've made it this far in the workshop, you know that ethics in software engineering is an issue, and so I'm going to skip on down. So in doing this work, I looked into the ACM Code of Ethics, the IEEE Code of Ethics, as well as the Joint Task Force on Software Engineering Ethics. And so what I found was that, in the IEEE Code, it's really designed for practitioners, and it says that they should be held to the highest standards of professional activities and treat all persons fairly and with respect. The ACM Code goes a little bit further by providing some more about, human ethics. And the Joint Code goes even further by looking at, emergent properties within the system, data privacy, software evolution, et cetera. And so these codes give a foundation for how we should behave as software engineers in industry. The ACM Code also, I just want to point out, does have some case studies that give scenarios of how you might consider an ethical situation with answers, and I'm going to talk about a bit about that later. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of an educator in North America. And so I wanted to understand the current state of SE ethics and kind of what we can do to improve our education for our students. And so in North America, we also have ABED as well as the CEAB, which give recommendations for educators on how to cover everything in the curriculum. And so in their curriculum guidelines, depending on whether it's an engineering program or whether it's a CS program, they recommend between 1 and 6 hours in ethics education. But all of the curricular recommendations really emphasize that this is a fundamental concept, which is great. So we know we want it as part of our training for students. Specific topics that they look at are really primarily around licensing, contracts, legal issues, but they are starting to push more social issues. But everyone agrees that this is a cross-cutting theme that should exist across the curriculum. So now I took a step back after looking at all of this literature, and kind of as an educator and researcher myself, I have these two open questions. So we want students to be expected to learn ethical skills, such as recognizing, raising, and responding to ethical concerns, as well as proposing ethical solutions. And so my question really is, if we assume a mastery of these ethical concepts, does that lead to ethical behavior? So I just dropped a quick poll in the chat, so feel free to vote live. So my question I have for you is that if I assume that students have achieved mastery over the ethical skills that I'm teaching in my classroom, are they in industry or even in my classroom, are they rote learners? Or are they what I'm calling perfunctory learners? These are more Machiavellian learners that will know the right answer, give you the right answer, but they have no interest in acting ethically. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we talk about kind of those who value ethics and consider it important to their education. And so I know, and we've already talked about this thus far today in the keynote, that changing any behavior is particularly a tall order. And if we only have 1 to 6 hours of instruction, then it's probably unreasonable. So if we want to actually see students thinking and seeing ethical issues, analyzing problems, and making informed decisions for the future, kind of how do we do that? And so my position paper is giving 4 opportunities that I think we can look at in terms of improving SE ethics. Okay, so if we look at just the kind of status quo of what I've read in many software engineering textbooks, ethics is presented in the form of vignettes. And so there's a small example such as this one: a deadline is quickly approaching for a project you are working on. You realize that you will not be able to meet the deadline under normal working hours. You're not allowed to take your computer home. What do you do? And it's presented with 3 possible answers. Download the data onto a personal drive and take it home. I think this was written before everyone had a lot of laptops. B, unsure, or C, stay at work longer and continue development. And so these scenarios, from the perspective of a grader, are amazing because you just auto grade it and you can pick which one the students, whether they quote unquote got the right answer. But in reality, these scenarios are so much bigger with more factors. This vignette does not give any kind of indication of the level of the person. If I'm a senior, team lead dev, I'm going to have a much different perspective over a brand new intern that's trying to prove themselves. Also, there isn't even the question of why this deadline, like if this deadline is reasonable. And so my first opportunity that I'm presenting today is for us to have more robust, large case studies, such as those in legal education. And so here's a second example based on a case study between Google and Microsoft. In 2015, there was a bug that Google's in-house security team found. After they find a bug, they have a strict 90-day policy where they will release the information to the bug publicly. And in this case, Microsoft asked them to extend this deadline until the next Microsoft Patch Tuesday, where they add new things to their software. But since Google has this firm policy, they did not, bend to Microsoft's will. And so it was publicized as kind of a gotcha opportunity. And users were exposed to this vulnerability for the 2 days between the disclosure and the patch release. And so this larger scenario has many more opportunities for nuance and questions. And so how do we strike a balance between making sure that these vulnerabilities do not get swept under a rug versus how do we ensure that developers actually have sufficient time to fix the vulnerability, but also that users aren't exposed. And so my first opportunity is that we need to create this large collection of robust case studies that are nuanced and talk about individuals involved in all levels of corporations. How can we do this? Both as researchers, we can partner with industry, we can create these case studies, but also I think we can get our students, special studies students, for example, we have here, to create these examples of ethical dilemmas in software, either by interviewing our alumni networks and having them explain issues that they had, but also looking at recent events in the news, such as whistleblowers. And Lucy, who's here, is also looking at whistleblowers. So I think we could possibly get some excellent case studies out of her PhD. So my second opportunity is that we take these brand new case studies that we've created and implement them as part of broader workshops in our curricula. So I'm just looking at the poll real quick. I see my options got moved out of order. So most people believe that we're somewhere around the middle, rote learners. One person thinks we do achieve ethical behavior, but we as a community acknowledge we have some places to go. And so let's take this opportunity to implement a more broader experience of ethics within our curricula. So the key issue that I identify in my second opportunity is that by giving a correct answer, such as in the ACM's case studies, it leads to this idea of binary thinking and doesn't encourage students to engage in divergent thinking. And so I really want to encourage us all to engage in multiple modes of instruction, having workshops, getting students to work in teams as part of project-based development, as well as role-playing. And I am a little short on time, so I'm going to get a little faster. Okay, so by having case studies across the curriculum, and so what our keynote was talking about, how this idea of whether it's within the curriculum or a separate study, I think we do need both as well. And we do need to present these ideas of ethics, but we also need to present them in the context of a formal argumentation and role-playing, but also software design, et cetera. And so I think we can have, the important part is to look at the problem and get students asking questions and looking at multiple solutions. Okay, and so, sorry, I have to go a little faster. So my first two opportunities are very concrete. My third and fourth opportunities are much more aspirational. I don't have the solutions yet. This is just what I think we could aim to go forward. So the third one is to look at getting students to value ethics and look at the effective domain. And so I think we need to prioritize ethics throughout our curriculum, which means that I believe that we need to add more affective learning objectives as part of the curricular goals by the ACM and the engineering accreditation boards. So for example, two affective examples could be to commit to treating colleagues fairly, as well as to defend intended actions as ethical. So, you have to prove that whatever you're proposing is actually an ethical solution. And in doing so, I can look at, going back to my Google example, we can say like, what was Google's motivation for this policy in the first place? Did Google have anything to gain by this temporary Microsoft vulnerability? And did Microsoft make a good faith effort to fix these vulnerabilities? And really getting into the why and the how of these individual cases, rather than just what action should I take next. So what questions lead to me being able to make a richer decision. And then finally, my fourth opportunity is for us to encourage professionalism. So my anecdotal evidence is that students by and far do not see software engineering as a profession. And this confers with one of our earlier speakers, where they found that looked at the number of total people in the US and the number of people who are ACM members. And so part of this, I believe, is because ethics is taught separate from technical concepts. So a way to potentially solve this is to integrate ethics across the SE curriculum, whether that be in requirements, whether that be in design and testing. And I have looked at examples of these, as well as communications between developers and users. And this, we're pushing, not me, but others are pushing for project-based learning. And so I think that's an excellent part. So, just like sustainability and security, can ethics become a first order operation? And finally, we need to find a way to engage students with professional organizations beyond the classroom. So professional societies could connect with students in like near peer mentoring relationships, I think would be an interesting way. But also, if they want individuals to be ethical, it's important that they actually play a stronger role in like speaking out and enforcing ethical issues in current software. Okay, and so just to kind of give you an overall view, all of these kind of fit together in an educational framework where if we create these case studies as researchers and educators and practitioners, we can use them in workshops to spread them across the entire SE curriculum and kind of get students to engage more in thinking about how they can be more ethical, whatever that means to them, and engage as part of a profession together. Okay, so the other thing that I just wanted to say was that we all need to do this together. And so in addition to questions, I would love to take feedback in terms of ideas that you might have for how we can do this as a community. Okay, so I will stop there and take a few moments for questions and discussions. So thank you.
Alicia, thank you very much for the very inspiring talk. As someone who teaches software engineering, I hope I can apply some of your suggestions. But immediately I was thinking of like where to fit these, because if you have a standard software engineering course for undergrad computer scientists, it's like one course we have dedicated to software engineering. And with all the phases, implementing a independent case study or like a project like this seems like infeasible to me. So what do you think about this?
Right. So creating the case studies that I mentioned, I wouldn't necessarily put inside our software engineering courses, but I think we can use other, like I teach a senior seminar in ethics in computing. I know there are similar seminars across the board. We can also have students that are interested in this domain that might be computer science and philosophy, or computer science and literature, and or journalism, getting multidisciplinary students involved in our research labs, as well as creating special courses to get these case studies created. But then once they are created, it's easy to implement them in a software engineering curriculum, where you might spend 2 hours of instruction, 1 to 2 hours of instruction, getting the core aspects of ethics down. But then when you're doing requirements and collecting data from stakeholders, consider ethics as that part. When you're doing development and testing, you can consider ethics as part of your assessment criteria, for example. And considering I don't know whether your software engineering course gets to maintenance and evolution, but I like the idea from earlier in the workshop of, if this isn't part of the assessment, students don't care about it. And so we need to figure out how to assess ethics and students' consideration of ethics as part of our software engineering courses. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. It's a very good point, and one key point to remember. We have a question from the audience. So first point, in relation to evaluation, an aptitude test might be applicable to software engineering ethics education. Second, it is being recognized widely that soft skills are needed from software engineers for a number of reasons related to collaboration and understanding context. This can also be the case for software engineering ethics skills, perhaps. So this is more like a remark. Thank you, Ryan. And we have a question from Justin. Thanks for the great talk. In my experience, I found that practitioners can sometimes be hesitant to discuss ethical dilemmas they have. Any ideas for how we might overcome this hesitancy to gather realistic, robust case studies?
Yeah, so there's been a couple efforts that I've been involved with in other engineering disciplines where they've been able to do this, such as chemical safety, as well as kind of first year civil engineering education. And they were able to get practitioners to speak openly when done appropriately, and they can be guaranteed an anonymity, as well as like modifying their name, modifying the company. So in the typical exams that are for, if you try to become a professional engineer in North America, in the ethics exams there, they take real case studies and then they abstract them and remove all identifying information. And I think, and this is very well documented in other engineering disciplines, and I feel that we can do the same for software engineering. Company XYZ introduced this bug, like the situations can always be abstracted.
That would be the solution. I think that, do you think that is due to that the other engineering disciplines, at least in Turkey where I live now, they have more established regulations, and like for the professions, like there is more like restricted code of conduct and consequences, whereas for software engineers this is not the case. I don't know, what is the situation in North America?
It's a very similar situation, and that's why, again, students don't really identify with it as a profession. And so in some of the other studies that I cite in my paper, they've found that in first year, most students believe that computer science is an ethical discipline in first year, but by fourth year or after an internship, they don't. And so we need to figure out how to get them to believe that they can be ethical as part of the industry. Yeah.
I think it makes the problem very clear. Any questions from the audience?
And I'll say anecdotally, like I've taught my ethics course many times, and once students kind of get a sense of the real problems that exist, they almost tend to become a bit nihilistic and are concerned about whether they actually want to be part of different corporations, depending on whether those corporations are ethical. So I think that we can make progress slowly with just exposure and getting students to